Our stewardship team's got us thinking about love languages this month. And I realized that when I was a kid, probably about 9, the age my kiddo Henry is now, my love language was castles. Lego castles, storybook castles. I laid siege to castles with toy catapults. I think it's why I ended up going to the college I went to. I fell in love with the Hogwarts feeling of Vassar College. It wasn't enough to carry me through. I dropped out twice. But I just wanted to live in these beautiful castle grounds, these crenellated walls that surrounded the whole campus. I didn't realize that the walls actually represented a real barrier that lay between the college and the town it was in, the post-industrial Poughkeepsie, New York, a city that had none of the glistening magic of the Hogwarts school I attended in its midst. Catherine was sharing with me this week the story, I think it was Penn State, who was contemplating building their own wall around the university and instead decided to invest in a civic engagement program and build relationships with the neighboring organizations, nonprofits around the university, relationships that whether or not the college did any good to help the town, certainly, she said, helped the college. Changed the culture within the school. I'm noticing more fear in my system these days. I'm guessing I'm not alone. I notice my throat is quick to clench. The distance between my ears and my shoulders seems to have shortened. It reminds me actually of the early months of the pandemic, these same sensations. So I think we're going to have to remember the lessons that we learned about what it means to survive and then maybe even thrive while living through a collective trauma. We're taking up baking bread again in our house. We've got the sourdough starter going. We're going to really have to slow down to get it finished. We take one step and then the day carries us away. But once it is, wouldn't it be nice to share it with our new neighbors? We're going to have a bread communion here actually in a few weeks. You'll get more details, but inviting anyone who took up that hobby and wants to bake a loaf of bread, we'll share bread together on a Sunday morning. Because I think the other choice, when we've got so much fear running through our systems, the other choice is to draw up the drawbridge, to put down the portcullis, to build a higher wall. And there is some wisdom here, I think. It's that wisdom of put your own oxygen mask on first, right? This is what I'm working on in my own life still. How do I care for myself well enough that I'm able to offer generosity not out of a sense of needing someone else to like me because I'm caring for them, but offer it out of the abundance of my own well-being? A wisdom in turning towards more care for the self, even as things get more desperate and demanding on the outside. But it's also true that when we do not care well enough for ourselves, building a bigger wall, a higher wall, can seem like the only reasonable answer. Back when Trump was first elected, the chef, Jose Andres, started talking about build longer tables, not higher walls. It first came to me as a t-shirt my mom gave me from Casa de Paz, where she was working with immigrants to help them get from being released after detention to the next stop along their journey. The shirt read, "If you have more than you need, build a bigger table, not a higher wall." And what Chef Andres is doing, he's working on a number of projects with the World Central Kitchen. One of them is to bring food and kindness to Ukraine, investing in food security through supporting Ukrainian farmers over these past several years now. Right here in our community, the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services Board voted unanimously this week to adopt a sanctuary resolution declaring support for immigrants who live and work in this community and ensuring Kensington police and other officials do not cooperate with ICE. Can feel small, it can feel desperate in these times, but we can, working together, make a difference. Thanks, Cindy Greenleaf and everyone else who advocated for that resolution. We know, intuitively, I think in our bones, we know here we have more than enough. We know that we can build that longer, bigger table, not a higher wall. In fact, I think we have an intuitive understanding collectively here that there is more than enough in this world to go around, that it is not scarcity that drives inequality, but systems of control and domination. The problem is not actual scarcity, but a perception of scarcity, not a lack of resources, but an inequitable system of distribution. In the most exploited, the most impoverished places in the world right now, children are starving and dying of AIDS because of the abrupt cutoff of the necessary USAID funds. It's far away and maybe hard to make space to feel amidst the deluge of all the evil being perpetrated by our country right now, but these are the consequences of a higher wall. So why do we build the wall? This is the question I'm struggling with, sitting with. And I do think when I'm not able to take care of myself well enough, when I'm not tending to my own inner life and my own needs well enough, that's when I find that instinct to build a higher wall, when it feels like it might be the only option. I was thinking about this when I got to see the production of Hadestown at Berkeley High School right now. And if you haven't seen it, it's an amazing musical, so see it there or somewhere. It's really quite beautiful. And shout out to a couple of our church youth who are in it, Annie Jensen and Katie Marshall, fabulous performances. And my wife's the director. But she did a great job too. But here's the song I want to tell you about from it. The song is the song that Hades sings with his minions. The song that Anais Mitchell composed as she worked on this process over years and years, composed as it first came to public attention during that first Trump administration. Why do we build the wall, Hades asks. We build the wall to keep us free. How does the wall keep us free? The wall keeps out the enemy. Who do we call the enemy, he asks. The enemy is poverty. And the wall keeps out the enemy. Because we have and they have not, because they want what we have got. What do we have that they should want? We have a wall to work upon. We have work, and they have none. And our work is never done, and the war is never won. The perverse logic of the wall makes the building of the wall itself the project to protect us from the ravages of building the wall. One of my wise colleagues, the Reverend Barbara Tenhove, once shared with me that she thinks about the boundaries that we need to be able to take care of ourselves, do that important work of putting our own oxygen mask on first, especially in times like these, that to do that we need boundaries, healthy boundaries, but not to build those boundaries like a wall out of bricks. Because when we build a boundary like a wall out of bricks, when it inevitably comes down, it hurts people. It falls and is dangerous. Instead, she says, we can create boundaries more like the organic growing of bark on trees. Boundaries that serve as that actual function, the real reason to have a boundary, to be the place where we meet the other, where we make contact between what we believe to be us and what we believe to be not us. Because boundaries that are built like castle walls are never the final word they intend to be. Build a 20-foot wall, they say, and someone else will build a 21-foot ladder. So healthy boundaries have to be that permeable membrane, intact enough to differentiate, to make space, to know what is inside and what is out, but supple enough to allow feeling at the point of contact. And I have to say, it's often a painful dance for me, holding the clarity of my own boundaries while staying present to the impact they have on others who would prefer something else from me. So painful, it often feels more comfortable to ignore my own boundaries. But then, of course, I end up resentful and back to building that thick wall. So it's confusing. This is tricky stuff, the work of boundaries and the work of love. And so confusing that I was trying to have some empathy for why our vice president maybe gets confused about the theology here. Did you hear about this? Our vice president said, in order to try and articulate his relatively new Catholic faith, said that there's this old school concept, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A very Christian concept. But it's not every day that a neophyte Catholic gets the Pope to come intervene with a theology lesson. Pope Francis responds, Christian love is not a concentric expansion of interests that little by little extend to other persons and groups. In other words, the human person is not a mere individual, relatively expansive with some philanthropic feelings. The true ordo amoris that must be promoted is that which we discover by meditating constantly on the parable of the Good Samaritan. That is, by meditating on the love that builds a fraternity open to all without exception. Love is not a limited resource that needs to be hoarded behind a wall. Love is not capital that must be guarded and invested wisely. It doesn't require quarterly ROI reports or charts to monitor its growth and decline. In that parable of the sower, after being robbed, beaten, and abandoned on the road, the first person who comes by is a Levite, which in the times it's like the UU minister comes by. For you, you're standing on the side of the road, you've been robbed, and you're hurt, and there's nothing to do. And the UU minister, instead of offering you a ride or even a phone to call and get some help, walks on by. And the next person who comes by, you're a little scared because they're wearing a bright red hat. But this bright red, MAGA-loving fellow citizen actually stops in the story. And they get down on their knees and they look you in the eyes and they say, "Are you okay?" Because their shared humanity has called them to tend to you in this moment. Their love is bigger than the political divide. It's a story that reminds us of the truth of our interdependence. That holy interdependence that we have enshrined as a basis of our moral theological framework. That interdependence that also points us to another word that is a more challenging reality, a word that in this country we have learned to almost have a religious allergy to: dependence. To be dependent in our culture is to be weak and needy, but if interdependence is the fundamental nature of reality, then dependency is an essential quality of all beings. Most of us learn from an early age that success in this life equals independence. The goal in our individualistic and materialistic society is to free ourselves of that feeling of dependency. How many horrified op-eds have you noticed in the last maybe decade touting the statistics about how many millennials in their 20s and 30s have failed to launch and are still living dependent children in their parents' homes? How many of us heroically try to organize our finances so that we will not end up dependent on our children in old age? Able to pay for basic bodily care that every one of us will eventually need if we're lucky enough to live that long. Try as we might to obscure and mask it, hard as we work to smother it with wealth, the truth of our dependency is fundamental to who we are. And if we can't hold with compassion our own dependence, then we will always have to defend ourselves against the dependency we see in others, to revile them or pity them or treat them paternalistically or find some way to try and exile them beyond the wall. So my invitation to you is this: have you ever seen beauty in your own dependency? If interdependence is that extraordinary truth we claim it to be, there must be some beauty in our dependency, in the reach to turn on the radio or television or computer in a lonely moment, to hear other voices, in the grasp for a lover's hand, in the kiss on a child's head that is meant to reassure the parent, the call to a friend, the postcard handwritten with care. In her poem, Blessing the Bread, Reverend Lynn Unger writes, something happens in kneading dough or massaging flesh. An imprint of the hand remains on the bodies we have touched. This is the lifeline, the etched path from hand to grain to earth, the transmutation of the elements through touch, marking the miracles on which we unwillingly depend. Can I let the beauty of my dependency reveal the crack in my wall? Let that beauty echo like the ancient trumpets around Jericho and find in the ruins my once sacred castle. Find in its ruins the beginnings of a bigger table. A table with room not only for the stranger, the immigrant, the MAGA-hatted Good Samaritan, but room for me too, more room for each of us. Room at this table for the fearful throat clenching, for the shame-filled dependency. The old words that we used to sing to Heiferdal, which is the tune of Blue Boat Home we'll close our service with in a moment, were this: earth was given as a garden, cradle for humanity. This is a theological thread through so many of the world's wisdom traditions, that all that is a gift. This earth and the sun and the moon and the stars it was born among that make life possible, it's a gift. Some theologies take this too far. It becomes a gift that we can never repay, that we're always struggling to be worthy of. But the true nature of a gift is that it's freely given. No payment necessary or expected. And yet even so, the true gift still comes with strings attached, not the coercive, manipulative kind of economic strings we usually mean by that phrase, but gossamer strands of connection, the permeable membrane of life touching life. Born on this planet, we have already been welcomed at the greatest table of all, an unceasing lesson in generosity, demanding of us only that we somehow find a way to say grace as we pass our daily bread among friends and strangers alike, along the etched path from hand to grain to earth. May it be so, and amen.